Well, Stuart, how you doing?
Hey there. Good to be here again.
Is it really?
Actually, it is.
You look like you got a little sun. Were you somewhere special this weekend?
Just the streets of New York, David. I don't do much else.
I thought you were in the Hamptons.
I was. Oh, God, you said, where's it?
Don't try to get out.
No, I won't. What is today's? We're at Thursday. Oh,
yeah.
This past weekend.
Yeah.
I didn't get all that much sun there. The truth is, it's not a healthy situation for my friend and his wife, and it's just sad.
So you didn't wait in line at the surf lodge to go to the...
I wouldn't know where the surf lodge was, but no, we were in his house most of the time, and that was fine. He had to have family there to help out with some chores because it's getting more difficult for him to do it. It's a really sad case.
I'm sorry to hear that, Stuart, that you weren't able to do your normal partying with the rich and famous. But, Stuart takes on some lost causes. I think it may be because he went to Vietnam and the Democrats pulled the rug out from underneath him and basically lost the war. And then Nixon saved it and put an end to it. That great man. But... another lost cause Stuart has taken on. He thinks within the dark recesses of my twisted mind that I have some positive things to say, and I will openly acknowledge I have very little positive.
They're hidden, but they can be developed.
And so Stuart has taken on the role as my positivity accountability coach. Okay, he's not. This is a thankless task, and not even a therapist could bring this about. But in that regard, I am going to start today without one of my usual lambasting rampages about someone who's pissed me off. One of the things that I admire in people is people who have suffered adversity and they instead of using it as a crutch, they overcome it and they move on, right? And even though they have, life can be very unfair, as we both know, and you can choose to let that ruin you, or you can choose to triumph over it. And I'm talking about, we had the Olympics this summer in France, and frankly, I didn't pay much attention to the events because I have no interest in a wokeified sports event that is completely ridiculous. But at the beginning of the Olympics, the singer Celine Dion, she gave a rousing, emotional performance of an Edith Piaf song, and it was really an amazing performance if you listen to it. And what makes it significant is that, she's obviously, everyone knows who she is. She's a famous singer. I can't say I'm a huge fan of hers, but she has a good singing voice and she's been around for a while. This is her passion. And she got sidelined by a neurological disease and she hasn't really been able to perform that much. And this was her comeback in a sense. And it really was amazing because, to see her get up there and kind of just do this. And throughout her illness, there's actually a documentary on Amazon about her, where she discusses what she's struggling with. And, this is someone I respect because she isn't sitting around going, oh, I'm discriminated against and the world is against me, like the Democrats in Chicago. Sorry, I had to throw that in. She is someone who's really, really, I think, an inspirational figure. And I think the fact that she's trying to continue with her career despite this problem and this ailment, I say it's very admirable. So that's my number one. I think it's something that moved me this summer.
Don't you feel much better for having done that?
In a way. But there's more. Stuart, I know you told me to find two, and I was like, come on. Well, yesterday I was looking online, and I saw an article by someone I've never really heard of before. Her name is Moira Donegan. And she is a feminist, a real feminist, an honest feminist. Unlike Gloria Steinem, Hillary Clinton, and the rest of them, who were apologists for the rapist Bill Clinton. Now, she wrote, she is way more liberal than I am, obviously, and she's
Irish.
Don't even go there. You know how the Italians feel about that. But she wrote an article in The Guardian, and it kind of picked up what I was discussing in my previous discussions with you, Stuart, and it's called why is alleged predator Bill Clinton still welcome in the Democrat Party? And she went through his abuse of women, and she called out the feminists who supported him, including Gloria Steinem, who still defends him and defends her position, claiming that because he supports abortion, that she was going to support him. And she kind of really calls out these old school 70s whining feminists who are complete hypocrites. And I think it took courage. I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting perspective. I mean, she also called out a lot that I didn't about Bill Clinton's presidency and what a disaster it was. But that's so long ago, who even cares? I just thought that it was interesting to see something like that written, particularly after I mean, of course, maybe it's my big ego, too. I want to hear people reflect my own thoughts. But I have to give this woman credit. She is an honest feminist, and she is a role model for young women, not Gloria Steinem, not Hillary Clinton, and the whole crowd of them, because they are really repulsive hypocrites who defend a rapist.
Well, I think you've just taken a very big first step.
It's all because of you, Stuart. It really is, because
There's
otherwise...
much more there. I know there's much more hidden.
This is I don't know. But, I think it's really, these two people have, in a way, shown me that there's not always a dark side to life. But there are others also besides me who even go beyond just trying to find positive things to say. And yes, I'm referring to our Vietnam veteran, Stuart.
Let's see, I want to start off with a question for those who are listening. How many of you have felt threatened or harassed by a black man in the subway or on the streets of New York? Raise your hands. If I could see those hands, I bet they're pretty much all out there. And I'd like to tell you about some scenarios that are associated with this question. First of all, a guy named David Penny. You may remember the name. He's a 24-year-old Marine, honorable discharge in 2021. The other guy in this little saga is a guy named Jordan Neely. He's 30 years old, a homeless man with 42 arrests for drug use, fare beating, and other stuff. Then there were also 43 responses by police and social service people for calls associated with this guy where he was going off the tracks and either about to hurt someone else or himself. His ad says he's got schizophrenia and PTSD and a bit of depression. I'll bet. Neely, he had a warrant for assault, outstanding warrant for assault of a 67-year-old woman. And that was when, on May 1 of 2023, he acted erratically on an F train, harassed people, threatened them. And he was restrained by one guy, a good Samaritan, I'll call him, and that's Daniel Penny. He came to the aid and the assistance of others and restrained this guy. And in so doing, he ended up with his arms around his throat. And though it's certainly not clear that he was intending to, but the guy died. The trial is to begin on October 8th. I don't know any more than that for now. I was hoping that there would have been no indictment. That's too much to ask, I suppose. But there have been huge contributions for his defense fund. That's one little story about a good Samaritan who is getting paid for it in a negative way. The other one is about a guy named Brian Chin. This guy's a local hero in Chinatown in Manhattan for trying to get drug dealers out of the Sarah Roosevelt Park. I know that park. I'm in there almost every second or third day walking through it. It's full of scum in different ways. Chin was trying to and he's a big guy, and he was trying to represent and make safe the park and get drug dealers out of there mainly, but there are other problems in there. And so on the 26th of August, just last week, is that last week or the beginning of this? 26th, still this week, is it?
I think it's this week.
Yeah. On the 26th, he encountered a vagrant living on the sidewalk, who was living on the sidewalk at the corner of Christie and Grand in Chinatown. And just to give you a little sense of it for those who are away, Chinatown, of course, it's just north of Canal, and that's where this is. And And Bowery Avenue, one of the oldest streets in New York City, is parallel to Christie. And Christie is just adjacent to this thin Sarah Roosevelt Park. So Brian saw this guy on the street, knew that he had been harassing some of the locals. He kicked him. The vagrant got up, found a chair, broke it, or at least it came up with a nail sticking out of it, and he hit Chin with it. And then there was a fight. Chin pummeled him. And the guy's in very serious condition. Again, I ask you, would you want some good Samaritan to come up and help you out in a time of trouble? When you felt threatened or those around you, you bet your butt you would. And on a train, when you've been in that situation, and I travel the subways and buses essentially every day, and it's not uncommon, or it was much more common during the pandemic. I used to ride then, and it's much less common because there are lots of people around. But when you were in a car with only one or two people, and those people were eyeing you, you felt threatened, you were at risk. And in this case, Penny stepped up, but so did Chin. I'll follow both their stories, but I'll have my fingers crossed that even if I don't know that Chin's going to be tried eventually, but he's been indicted.
Well, this is all occurring in Manhattan, so we know you're getting me on a tirade, Stuart. We know who the district attorney is. He's the one who doesn't want to prosecute criminals, except those who defend us from criminals.
Let me just add a few points.
Yes.
I'd say, what do you want to do as a citizen now? One, I think you need to institutionalize those who pose a danger to themselves or others until doctors decide that the individual is no longer a threat. I recognize that could be a return to ancient days, but that's what's called for. You need to get these people off the street who are of danger to themselves and, more importantly, to those around them. Second, don't release dangerous dudes from jail pending trial. That's a function of what the glorious state legislature and city council have done jointly. I don't blame the mayor for this at all. I think he's rolling, trying to stop a big ball from rolling downhill. But you can't put these guys out pending trial. You can't. If it's a matter of public safety to others, use your head, goddammit. Third, stop making it so hard to stop and frisk. That's a function of what the state legislature has done. But that process stop people from going further. You get them on small things, and you find a gun on them, or you find that they're out, they have a warrant outstanding, you take them off the street. Make it safe for those who really care about safety. I'm not sure that really counts in many of the households uptown. Really not. If they can find the parents. And finally, I vote for the so-called progressives to get their asses off the city council, and certainly the two leaders of the state legislature, both Carl Hasty, he's the assembly speaker, and Andrea Stewart Cousins, who's the Senate leader. These people have nothing more in mind than getting the most they can in the way of entitlements. And they don't give a damn about fiscal welfare or the general public safety. I've had enough.
So have I, Stuart. And I'm not even going to, I've already talked about my loathing of fat Alvin Bragg, but he is part of this whole movement as well as legislatures, including one who lives in this building, who sponsored the bail reform. They all deserve what they have coming to them. And speaking of that, Stuart, and I want to point out that in that disgusting spectacle that took place in Chicago, in the murder capital of America, one of the delegates was held up, despite them putting a wall around the convention to protect them. One of the delegates was held up at gunpoint and was subject to armed robbery. And normally you would say that's terrible. But you know what? This is what you voted for. And it's too bad more of them didn't get held up by gunpoint so they could experience what the rest of us are. Because most of these people do not take subways. They have limousines. Because they are the ultimate limousine liberal. Which, hypocritical, self-righteous, sanctimonious morons. And in that note, Stuart, I can't stop thinking and hating Tampon Tim Waltz, okay? His speech at that convention was completely preposterous. Once again, he's going off about how weird his opponents are and how they went to Yale and blah, blah, blah. But the Obamas spoke at that convention and they went to Harvard Law School. Schumer, the reptile, also went to Harvard. The Clintons both went to Yale. Pete Buttigieg, who also spoke, went to Harvard. Who's he criticizing? I'm sorry, he went to some no-name college no one's ever heard of. It wasn't smart enough to get into a good school, but he really is ridiculous. You're criticizing the majority of your party.
And talking about such non-issues is just not the way to go. The Trump contingent haven't yet learned that chastising others for what I'll call non-issues takes away from the need the public has to hear about issues in policy.
Oh, that's a good point as well. No one cares about this. And once again, he apparently when he was a teacher, or at some point when he was in Minnesota, a city of Minneapolis of which he let burn to the ground, he took students on an exchange program to China, which is fine. I think it's good for children to be exposed to different cultures. But on the trip, he told the children, apparently, it's reported, that here no one is poor because they all share. The implication being that in America we don't. Well, first of all, the standard of living in America is far better than it is in China. Second of all, we all saw the Tiananmen Square massacre. And we also know between the Soviet Union, where Bernie Sanders vacations, or honeymoons, and China, 100 million people were murdered, tortured, etc. These regimes and the people in China, they share with a gun to their head. They do not share voluntarily. And the whole point of our American system is individualism, rugged individualism, and it offers people the opportunity to move up in life, which a lot of countries don't. For example, China. And apparently, Tampon Tim doesn't seem to know. Instead, he wants to put his hands in my pocket, take my money, and try to give it to other people. Along with that, he still continues to have a strange fascination with putting himself in the pants of juveniles. I think we've discussed this also, how he thought it was okay that minors should get genital mutilation surgery, and he signed a bill to that effect without their parents' consent. So I don't need him telling me how to share. And on another note, this whole notion of sharing, the Obamas both spoke at the convention. And I have to say, I like them, I respect them. I don't agree with a lot of the things that he did as president, but they both spent a lot of time attacking Donald Trump, okay? And I know they are upset and they feel he, stigmatized them by perpetrating the birther story and all this racist stuff. But you've got to move beyond it, because all you do is empower him when you do that. More importantly, if you're going to call Donald Trump out for pimping the birther story, why aren't you calling out Hillary Clinton in her campaign? Because when she ran for president in the New Hampshire primary, her campaign was spreading stories that he was a Muslim. I would say that's pretty bad. And her disgusting rapist husband in the South Carolina primary said about Obama, he should be carrying my bags. So who's the racist, Stuart? And why are you so outraged by Trump but not your own predator? And then Michelle Obama also suggested, how much money do we really need? And also playing into this whole share the wealth narrative. But I don't think these people look in the mirror very often, because her and Obama own $30 million in real estate. They have a house in Georgetown, Hawaii, Martha's Vineyard, and Chicago, I believe. Okay? That's 30. That seems like a lot of houses and a lot of money. Why is she telling me to share? Shouldn't she be? She's got more than I do. I mean, the hypocrisy is amazing. And if anyone read the Communist Manifesto, which I'm sure Tim Walz never did, even though he perpetrates it in these, stupid, platitudes that he spews out, they talk about having an elite 2% who has everything, while the rest of everyone else kind of is subject to their whim. I believe it's in there. And that's exactly what the Democrats are. They hold a lot of money, a lot of assets. They have all the financing. And then they want to take your money and redistribute it. And by the way, all these immigrants they've allowed to flood through the border, they're not coming here to share their wealth. They're coming here to build wealth. They're leaving societies like Venezuela, where the communist systems that Tim Walz seems to embrace have been utter failures and caused
point.
more human misery than ever. So, Democrats in Chicago, I'm not all filled with joy about the nonsense that went on there. And I think it was kind of funny at the end of this, Stuart, that Robert Kennedy Jr., a vet from the biggest liberal Democrat family in America, basically, they're like royalty to some people. He endorsed Donald Trump, and I'm sure he's getting something quid pro quo for that.
He expects to. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, apparently he went to Kamala. She wouldn't meet with him. Then he went to Trump, and I'm sure Trump, he's a grifter. He doesn't care. But, I mean, his entire family denounced him, including his sister, said it was disgusting. But I'm glad.
It's got to be humiliating for the family.
In a way, it should be. But isn't it interesting that they can denounce him for endorsing Trump, but they never denounced their Uncle Ted, who killed Mary Jo Kopechne in Chappaquiddick? And let's talk about Joe Kennedy, the patriarch of that whole criminal organization, okay? He was a Nazi sympathizer, he was a bootlegger, and a crook. They never denounced him for that. And his daughter, Rosemary, had learning disabilities, okay?
Oh, yes.
And she was
away.
Yeah, she was perfectly fine. There was nothing wrong with her. She just had learning disabilities and wasn't going to be a Rhodes Scholar. So what he chose to do is he had a lobotomy performed on her. It botched it and caused her serious brain damage. And after this, he locked her away in an institution for over 20 years, kept her away from the family. 20 years later, they went to find her. And I think Eunice Kennedy started the Special Olympics. At least she tried to compensate for it, but I've never heard them denounce this guy. Who does that to their own kid? A Kennedy. That's all I can say. So, as bad as Robert Kennedy is, and he is bad, and he's odd, I mean, one of the things I've learned about him, Stuart, is how he collects roadkill. I think you've heard this as well. And
the park.
Yeah. And then he got a bear on the side of the road that had been killed, left it, and I guess he didn't have time to carve him up and eat him. I guess that's how he got the worms in his brain. So he left it in Central Park as a joke. Are you laughing?
No. I read it, and I keep wondering what the hell is going on.
I have no idea. The guy is odd. And, he did say also that, and he denies it now, that COVID was engineered not to infect Jews and Asians.
What?
It was on tape. And then he backtracked. Yeah. I mean, as evil as Dr. Fauci is, and I heard he had West Nile, too bad he's still alive, but that's enough. No, don't be sympathetic to him. But, I mean, come on. Well, Dr. Fauci is not that smart. And, I mean, I've never heard such, that's almost like a Nazi-type thing to say, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Well, him and Trump will make good bedfellows. They can just, he was apparently an environmental activist and cleaned up the Hudson River.
He was.
And you could give him credit for that. But now he's getting in bed with a guy who goes, drill, baby, drill.
I just don't think, I think Trump is more likely to just put him aside in a room somewhere and not give him much access to anything. I think he'll come down hard on him if he starts to say things.
Of course he will.
He promised he'll do something, I would suspect, and it won't happen.
No, if he gives him a job, he'll probably fire him in a week anyway, which is what he does with everyone else. And speaking of Trump, okay, he's been having his own little meltdown lately. And I think what's kind of funny is he was recently been posting on his Truth Social. He had a picture of Kamala and Hillary on it and made some crack. I think the post itself made a crack about see how your career might end after giving someone a blowjob. Obviously a slam at Hillary because Kamala's could be on her way to being president. Hillary is a failure. So, this is the kind of stuff, juvenile high school boy nonsense crap that a 70-year-old fatso was posting. But that all said, we were talking about the roadkill, Stuart, and how RFK likes to pick up roadkill, but apparently you have your own roadkill traumas.
Yeah. Let me first give a little background to it. I love birds. It's a confession. I was introduced to them back in California a long time ago, and it just grows. I'm inept as an identifier, but I try, and I love the spirit of it. For those who are interested, you can check an app called Merlin, put out by Cornell University, and it helps to identify by sound and by visual when you snap a photo what you're looking at. Not perfect, but they're trying and getting better. I will say that on one occasion I photographed a small bird that was in, this was in the Ramble in Central Park. I photographed a small bird from behind, and it came up albatross. Now, an albatross has an 8 or 9 or 10 foot wingspan, and it's over the ocean all the time. But so I say there are some glitches in Merlin. Anyway, more importantly, many millions of birds die yearly in this country from flying into windows and buildings. I'll give you 2 difficult scenarios for birds. If lights are on at night, birds can get disoriented. This is most important during migration, both north and south, coming over the country, many over New York. They can get disoriented. This causes confusion, exhaustion, and that can result in an inability to navigate their course. Some of these birds have been found to be circling buildings in New York, and they don't know what to do. So there's a distraction from lights. And so some cities, including New York, have started to limit lights on in commercial buildings at night during migration. There's an outfit called Lights Out Louisville that's on, and in Atlanta, Houston, New York City, and Dallas and Chicago, things are happening. The second place where you see this happening is with clear windows. No matter what the time of day, and it has nothing to do with migration particularly, birds just cannot understand that there's a barrier there, because what happens is the front of a piece of glass reflects the territory around it, the surroundings, the environment around it. And so birds do not recognize the window as a barrier. And so they hit it quite often, and the U.S. loses millions and millions of birds this way every year. I want to use a B instead of an M. I think that's true, but I'll just say with millions and millions. And architectural codes in New York City and elsewhere are starting to accommodate this need to protect some of our little feathered friends. And I just want to give you one little scene that happened to me that David hinted at. I was walking on University Place, just south of Union Square, at the intersection pretty much of 13th Street and University. And as I walked south, I came across a bird, and this was busy during 11:30 noon, busy midday. I saw a bird lying on the ground. I pick up the bird, don't know exactly what it was. Typical of me, don't know what it was exactly. Bigger than a sparrow and brown. So I pick it up. And now I know from having lived in California and seeing this phenomenon with windows that they hit and you hear a thud. It's an ugly sound when you're in your house. And believe me, these things happen. The window problem happens more in short buildings than in tall. Not that's the way it is. I'm just trying to say it can happen anywhere. It can happen in rural areas. It can happen anywhere. They can't see that it's a barrier. So I picked this bird up. And maybe it was warm. I don't know what it was that made me feel it was alive, but it certainly was not struggling to get out of my hand. It had been lying there. People are walking by me, hundreds. No one's doing anything. One guy comes up to me and says, "Can I help?" I say, "Sure." He says, what do you think we should do? I said, I'd like to contact a bird rehabber. They have these rehabilitators around the country. And I knew there was to be one of them up in the Upper West Side. I said, if you could call the Audubon Society in New York City and ask them where the nearest rehabber is, I'll take the bird up there. He gets on the phone. And then he's turning the phone over to me because the lady wanted to give me directions to the rehabber. And I must have, for some reason, as I'm talking to the Audubon lady, I must have released my grip slightly on the bird, and bam, it was gone. And it flew like a dart toward Union Square. First of all, I felt real good about it. But the idea is that they hit buildings or windows, and sometimes they're stunned, or sometimes break their neck and die. And think about it if you want to hear more about that subject and how you can help the Audubon Society. That's my story.
I didn't know if you realized this, Stuart, but they changed the name of the Audubon Society.
Oh, don't get me started.
Because he was a racist.
It's unrelated. I mean,
I know.
It's only in New York, not other. I don't know of other places within Audubon who are doing it. It's not a national position.
Preposterous.
It's preposterous.
And second of all, I want to congratulate you, and I did not know that you were a bird whisperer, along with a Vietnam veteran. And I hope
incompetent birder.
And I also want to make sure that you thoroughly washed your hands after this.
I suppose I did.
You suppose?
Well, I don't remember.
You're going to end up with bird flu. I mean, seriously.
I suppose I must have done it when I got home, but whatever.
I suppose. It's not a suppose. Am I going to have to come down to your apartment and make sure you have soap and to clean your hands with proper?
You're not going to grade my
Listen, if you're going to teach me to be positive, I'm going to teach you to wash your hands thoroughly.
I do.
We live in New York City. It is a bacteria factory.
So when I tell you that sometimes along the walk, along the platforms on the subway, sometimes I'll pick up trash and throw it in the. I want to teach a visual lesson.
You've told me this. We've heard this before, and that's what this bird thing reminded me of. I'm so disturbed. But, this is what someone who likes to pursue lost causes does sometimes. Cleaning up trash in one of the dirtiest cities in America besides Naples, where they don't pick up the garbage. But anyway, Stuart, I think we've once again outstayed our welcome. So until again, we'll be back with more stories, and I'm going to have to really work on coming up with something.
Oh, it's going to get easier and easier.
No, it isn't.
Oh, yeah.
All right, well, I'll see you soon.
Good show. Take care.